Good day. Welcome to the CORY Morgan Show as we make our way through spring. It's starting to stay. That's one thing. I hate those clock changes. They annoy the crap out of me. I think they're stupid in principle in general. But I got to admit, it's nice when you finish supper and it's still light outside. It kind of shows me that we're getting out of the bloody winter darkness. All the same, that discussion's still going on. BC's stabilizing there. And I know some people, oh, it's a big hill to die on. We got to go this way or go that way. I don't care either way. Just pick one and stay with it. I'm lazy. I don't want to change my clock twice a year. It's a pain in the butt. Well, actually, I don't even have to change it. Your phone and everything does it all automatically for you and everything, but I don't want to change my sleeping patterns twice a year. Leave me alone. By the way, lots of other stuff to cover besides clock changes, all sorts of stuff in the news from Canada's wartime stance to CBC personalities turning and ripping back on the CBC. And, I don't know where else to go with everything else. My guest is going to be a fellow named Jerry Amernick. He's an author and journalist, and he's written things talking about Canada's real truth tellers, pushing back and fighting against historical revisionism, because that is happening. They're erasing our history or trying to, and ruining Canadian just ruining what the people who built the nation for where it is. Is it any wonder that an independence movement's getting rolling? So let's talk about independence movements getting rolling and some of the hazards going on. So as this independence movement continues to grow and organize across Western Canada, the most irresponsible and unprincipled thing opponents to the movement could possibly do is block the legal mechanism of separation provided by the Clarity Act. Yeah, that's exactly what they're trying to do. I mean, never while Quebec prepared to hold independence referenda were Quebecers told they weren't allowed to have the vote. There were many opponents to Quebec's independence movement, of course, but none of any prominence dared to tell them they didn't even have the right to hold a referendum. In the case of Alberta, though, opponents to independence are telling Albertans, you aren't allowed to leave. In fact, you aren't even allowed to hold the question. Is it any wonder the analogy of an abused spouse is often used when describing Alberta's relationship with the Federation? You're not allowed to leave. Let's get right to the point. The secession of a province from the Federation in Canada is perfectly legal. The Clarity Act lays out the pathway to get there. People can certainly question whether or not Alberta will be able to pass all the hurdles provided within the Act, and it's going to be a tough job to make it through all those hoops and requirements. To say a province hasn't the right to pursue the steps laid out in the Act, though, is an outright lie, and it only heightens division and anger. Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi has partnered with Indigenous chiefs in Alberta to oppose the process of independence. His party has been slipping in the polls, and he needs to latch on to something to try and gain relevance. And those chiefs are seeking a court injunction to block the democratic exercise of gathering signatures to hold a democratic referendum on independence. To block that provincial right would be a clear violation of the Clarity Act. We should be confident that a judge will realize that and toss out the application from the chiefs, but we've seen enough terrible rulings from judges already to know we can't rely on common sense from the bench. It's interesting how opponents to independence decry the movement being as one supported by a tiny minority, yet they're terrified at the prospect of putting it to a general vote. I mean, wouldn't they want to put this to bed in a referendum so we can stop talking about it? Look, polling is all over, but it indicates we're looking at around 30% of the provinces dedicated to pursuing Alberta's independence. That's a long way from a referendum win, but momentum is on the side of the independence movement, and a lot can change over 8 months. When 1 in 3 Albertans have given up on the Federation, Federalists would be better served to listen to their grievances rather than try to steal the democratic means of expression from them. To cork the bottle and ban independence referendums would be corking the bottle not just in Alberta, but in Quebec. And while the vast majority of independence supporters would never participate in or condone extreme acts, when we're looking at millions of people supporting this, it's not inconceivable that an unhinged soul or two might be inspired to do something dangerous. Those who might not remember, between 1963 and 1970, the FLQ conducted nearly 200 bombings. They did multiple kidnappings and were responsible for the deaths of 6 to 9 people. And during those years, there was no framework or mechanism for Quebec to become independent, and it created dangerous extremists. Much of what ended the terrorism being committed in Quebec was the presentation of a democratic outlet for their independence movement. In 1968, the Parti Québécois was formed. René Lévesque was leading and started the process of turning the independence movement there into a political one rather than a revolutionary, violent one. Quebecers aren't violent by nature, and they embraced being able to form independence parties and hold referenda on the issue. Even when losing the referendum, the FLQ didn't reappear because people knew there was still a path to independence, and they accepted that the province wasn't ready for it. With 1 in 3 people in Alberta currently supporting Alberta independence, 1 for Quebec, it's no insignificant number of people who are so dejected with the Federation they want to leave it. Banning the possibility of holding a referendum won't reduce independence support. even if it makes Federalists feel a little better about themselves. So right from the Clarity Act itself, whereas the government of any province of Canada is entitled to consult its population by referendum on any issue, and is entitled to formulate the wording of its referendum question. That's right out of the Clarity Act, guys. Are opponents of independence prepared to repeal that act? There's only going to be one way to resolve the budding independent movements in multiple provinces across the country now. Hold referendums, get the question settled peacefully and democratically. Fight against the concept, guys, not the means, or things could go badly for everybody. All right, well, that's what's got me starting to rant off today, and I'm into the news editor, Dave Naylor. What else is going on, Dave?
I'm outraged, Corey. Outraged, I tell you.
What did I do to piss you off this time?
No, not you.
Oh, okay.
As you know, I'm British, and the powers that be in England have decided they're going to take Winston Churchill off the £5 note.
That floored me when you said that in that meeting earlier today. Like,
I mean, it's one of the greatest Britons ever. Wartime hero. We'd all be speaking German if it wasn't for him. And they decided to erase history and take him off. And you know what they're putting on? A hedgehog.
A hedgehog.
A hedgehog.
And the world's most famous hedgehog isn't even from England.
No. I mean, I don't get it. And it's not just England. It's Canada, too. The erasure of our history.
Well, it ties in, actually, with the guest I'll be having on later, where they're going after Sir John A. Macdonald and Dundas and just pretty much every other figure. They're wiping it out. It is nuts.
No.
I mean, Churchill in England, I mean,
they're one and the same.
Aside from the royal family, if you asked anybody around the world to name a historical, famous, Englishman, it would be Winston Churchill.
Not a hedgehog.
No.
All right. Well, I'm outraged. I'm going to write to the king.
Oh, well, I'm sure he's all ears.
Sure he is. Lots going on in the news today, Corey, as you hinted. We've got, you were saying earlier you didn't see it, but the testimony yesterday by former CBC host Travis Donraj was unbelievable. Just carved everybody, toxic personality, made David Cochrane and Rosie Barton look like idiots. David Cochrane called Tamara Leach trailer trash and all that sort of stuff. And he said there's this list of 45 people that are banned from being interviewed on the CBC, and they're mainly like prominent conservatives, right? So for CBC to say that they're fair and balanced is a lie, because they're not.
Well, it's kind of exposing what we all knew all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? This is just shining the light on it. Everybody kind of knew.
Yeah. Now it's out in the public, and they're refusing to release the list publicly.
Well, of course they are. Are they denying there is a list?
I don't think they're denying there is a list. And Travis said he would give it to the MP committees. So
good.
It'll eventually come
out.
Yes. I bet you're on it.
I hope so. That would be an honor.
Your favorite story is back in the news, the Kamloops 215 children burial hoax. Alberta Senator Scott Tanis came out and said that Canadians need solid proof. We need to know definitively whether their body's there. And he's basically saying, get digging. And, he says, how can you fight residential school denialism when you're saying all this stuff, but there's no proof out there? So
that's it. I think in my last column, I talked about that, there are a lot of horrible things that I'm sure happened, but now everybody's going to be looking at, well, is that more BS like the Kamloops hoax, or is this real? I mean, until you seek the truth in one, people are going to have trouble believing the other.
Exactly. So there's been some controversy down in Ottawa last week or so on the parliamentary budget officer. It used to be a guy called Jason Jakes, and the Liberals let his term expire. I think obviously because he had criticized them heavily and said their budgeting was unsustainable. So they appointed another woman to take over. But a Commons committee yesterday voted 5-4 to demand Jake's return. So Liberals obviously voted against it, but the opposition held the majority on that committee. So we'll see if the government listens to them. I kind of doubt it. We got a good video on a child's birthday party in a New Westminster trampoline park. The family brought in the cake from the outside, and the business doesn't allow outside cakes, and it degenerated into a staff member throwing the cake on the floor, and people getting punched in the face, and RCMP being called, and I'm sure somewhere over in the corner was a kid crying.
Well, it's a birthday every child is going to
It's a
remember, aren't
birthday
they?
every child.
And, this is the sort of thing keeps therapists in business.
Exactly,
But,
exactly. That's why Chuck E. Cheese kind of went out of business, I think.
eh,
And big energy news in the States. We can't even build a pipeline. Trump has announced a $300 billion refinery to be built in Texas, paid for by an Indian oil company. So they're going to be expanding hugely while we can't even get our exports to Tidewater.
well, I looked at that. I could see that. I mean, that's the first I saw that was in the Western Standard today. But Keystone, I can see the demand really coming back for Keystone. They're
Yep.
going to need a lot of feedstock. I know people are saying, "Oh, that'll be Venezuela feeding that." Well, that's a little ways to go. I mean, Keystone's mostly built. That thing just needs to be finished up. We can't get one to the West Coast. Might as well send it down to Texas.
Exactly. I agree.
Well,
We agree on something finally.
that and yeah, well, I won't go into those details on hedgehogs.
No.
All right. Well, I'll let you back to the newsroom. We'll see you at the pipeline in a little while.
Pipeline tonight,
Working
yeah.
on some more issues right on. Well, thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
See you in a while. So yeah, it's lots on the go, from hedgehogs to pipelines to war to CBC committees. And the reason we can do all that, guys, is we're going to nag is we're going to rattle the cup and look for subscribers. But it's because of you guys. $10 a month, $100 for a year. Not a bad price at all to get your news. And that keeps all this stuff going on here. If you haven't subscribed yet, guys, check it out. westernstandard.news/subscription. Take one out. It's well worth it. Invest in your own news copy. Let's see some of the comments. Chris McLaughlin saying, so the democracy of the many need to heed the greed of a few First Nations chiefs. Yeah, I'll go on about Ninshi and his little thing there in a little bit. Another person saying the Bardic entropy, saying these are meant for a nonviolent way of leaving. People really don't know or understand the history of mankind. There are only so many ways to separate. That's it. And Canada is very unique. Very few countries in the world do have an ability built in where we can separate, with a democratic referendum. That's why so many independence movements, unfortunately, do turn to violence, do turn to street riots, do turn to ugliness. And we've got the means. But here we've got people saying we shouldn't even allow Alberta to discuss it. That's problematic. So let's see, towards the end of the show, by the way, we're trying different things. I did manage to get a fella to call in. If you're looking to call in and talk about things, the number will be down on the bottom of the screen there. You can call in 866-479-9378, and we can chatter about some of the other issues going on throughout the show. I like that live ability to go back and forth. So it's not just my voice going all the time, or the guests who will be on in a little while. I want to talk a bit about media, though. This is for those who didn't see it. So over the weekend, there was some demonstrations in New York outside of Mayor Mamdami's house with some guys, I guess some pretty radical right-wing types, whatever. But there were counter-protesters. And from those counter-protesters, two young guys suddenly came in and threw bombs into the works and ran for it. Very, very dangerous. It was determined by the police. These were real bombs. These had they detonated, which they thankfully didn't, they could have and probably would have killed and maimed a number of people. Very dangerous, very frightening, very problematic. So how, though, does the media respond to this? Here's a CNN headline. This is just, I really had to double check. This was true. This is one of the few areas where CNN actually deleted it, though, so they realized how far they'd gone. This is what it says by its text. Two Pennsylvania teenagers crossed into New York City on Saturday morning for what could have been a normal day, enjoying the city during abnormally warm weather. But in less than an hour, their lives would drastically change as the pair would be arrested for throwing homemade bombs during an anti-Muslim protest outside of Mayor Zohran Mamdami's house. What? Yeah, they made it sound like, oh, well, there were just a couple of young fellas out for a picnic in Central Park coming in from Pennsylvania, and I don't know, they tripped upon a couple of homemade bombs and just out of the blue decided to throw it into a crowd. Well, where on earth do you guys come from with this? This is insane. This was a attempted terrorist act that thankfully failed and nobody was hurt. But for you guys to bend over backwards so hard, oh yeah, the other part they forgot to mention, they yelled Allahu Akbar as they threw the bombs. That's something they certainly don't want to talk about either. But we should talk about these things because there's a problem. All right, so that's one form of contemporary revisionism, but let's talk about the problem of historical revisionism with our guest. I've been looking forward to Jerry Amerinick, who is a novelist and journalist, and he put a great article together in C2C on Canada's real truth tellers and people pushing back against some of the revisionism that's going on out there and really undercutting, in my view, the national unity and national pride. So let's bring Jerry in and have a conversation. Looks like he popped out of the lobby there. Okay, well, he's having a little technical issue. He'll be in shortly. So I'll give a little more background on him, though. You might remember a guest I had a while ago, last year at some point. His name is Patrice Dutil. He wrote a book on Sir John A. Macdonald and just breaking down the apocalyptic year of 1885. It was just 1 year of Sir John A. Macdonald's period, and a very historical one, but just giving a good historical account. And apparently that is controversial. Let's try again, bring Jerry in and see if he can speak a little more time. Here, we've got you. Thank you.
Hi, Corey. Hi, how are you today?
Good, thank you. As I was saying, I really appreciated your article in C2C and
Yeah.
listing out and just seeing that we have actually a number of people, as you call them, the real truth tellers. There's people effectively pushing back and fighting back against this trend of historical revisionism in Canada.
Yeah, well, it's been a plague, I think, certainly in the last number of years. It's been actually going on for quite a while, but I think it went into overdrive in the last number of years. And I'm a novelist. I write historical novels, and I'm also a journalist. I write nonfiction books as well. And everything I write always has a lot to do with history. I'm kind of a history junkie. And I was getting quite upset with the canceling of major historical figures in Canada. And my literary agent suggested, I guess about 3 years ago, I read a book about history, and it kind of sat on the back burner. And then eventually I wrote it, and it came out recently. It's called Sleepwalking. And it's basically about historical revisionism in Canada and all the fallout that's been associated with it. And I get into all kinds of things. If you've been into the book, the middle part of the book, though, is the real meat of it, as I get into historical figures who have been canceled and vilified, starting with John A. Macdonald. In the Toronto area, I get into Henry Dundas, Egerton Ryerson, who had a university named after him. He's been scandalized. I talk about Edward Cornwallis, the founder of Halifax in Nova Scotia. He got canceled, and Judge Matthew Begbie in British Columbia, who was largely responsible for bringing BC into Confederation. These are all major historical figures who have been canceled. And that's what the book is about. And the article that you cite there about the real truth tellers are people I have encountered who are trying to set the record straight on all these figures.
Yeah, and I noticed one of the first ones was Patrice Dutil, who I had on my show last year when he released his book
Yeah.
on Sir John A. Macdonald. And it was
Yes.
fantastic because he wasn't trying to canonize Sir John A. Macdonald. He documented him as an imperfect person, but also didn't try to turn him into a monster as revisionists do. You know, they as if he was some sort of person who thrived on oppressing Indigenous people or tried to starve them. He wrote the real truth, at least, of how Sir John A. Macdonald was with that historical lens on it. And we really need more of that sort of thing. But we won't see the CBC and others promoting Mr. Dutil's book. Instead, they're more focused on canceling that sort of effort.
Well, yeah, it's not just the CBC. I would see mainstream media in general has been guilty and complicit in going along with revisionist history for a number of historical figures. I blame the media. I think they've been largely irresponsible. They pick up on something and say it's true, when in fact it isn't. And it's said over and over and over again. But the media, by and large, has not done its due diligence. So I'm not impressed with the efforts. It goes beyond the CBC. Major TV networks have scandalized these characters I've written about, and they haven't done their homework. My book is about facts. I go into the historical record of all these people, and I look at facts, as Patrice did in his book. And he incidentally is one of the speakers who spoke at my book launch. So that's what it's about. We have facts on one side, and we have those who are perpetuating an ideology on the other side.
Yeah, and I like your title, Sleepwalking, and the cover of your book is great. Just shows a couple of stickmen figures walking across kind of blindly,
Right.
not paying attention. It brings that woke aspect, which is more of a modern term. But part of an issue I think we have happening all over the place is people are trying to measure historical figures under the modern lens of what's considered ethically responsible or acceptable today, and it's really an irresponsible way to look at that. I mean, things were completely different a couple hundred years ago.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that concept, that phenomenon is called presentism, where you look at the past through the lens of the present. And the first part of my book, I get into that subject in a big way. You can't do that. You can't look at 100 years ago through the lens of today, never mind 200, 300, 400 years ago. It's a different world, different values, and different standards. So I talk about that and use some analogies to make that point. But even aside from that, well, with the revisionists, I mean, they are falsifying the historical record of all these people, telling falsehoods about them and about our history. And that's where my book really gets into the meat grinder, trying to set the record straight about these people, as does the article that was in C2C. These are the people that are trying to set the record straight.
Yeah, well, and it's causing very real damage to us, socially, culturally. We see protests where the founder of the country, Sir John A. Macdonald, was torn down, the statue of, and
Yeah,
the
right
fear
across
it's
Canada. Yeah.
the fear it's put into politicians, because even in Ontario, it took years before they had the courage to take a box that they'd built around the statue down. They were
Yeah.
afraid of protests. I mean, when our premiers won't even stand up for things, then we're in some deep trouble.
Well, I mean, I said the media is complicit. I mean, government officials virtually at all levels are also complicit because they lack the guts to do anything about it. And this is true with all these figures I've cited, you know. And by the way, in doing my book, I reached a few conclusions. One of them is that young people don't know history in this country, and I don't blame them. I really blame the schools for not teaching history. Another conclusion is that much of what is said to be Indigenous history is, in fact, revisionist history. Um, there's two more I want to mention to you. The third one is that the alternative or woke version of history is all based on misinformation and comes with an ideology and an agenda. And the agenda basically is to undermine the country and all that it stands for. And the last one, which might be the most surprising, the biggest perpetrator, the biggest advocate of revisionist history in Canada is our own federal government.
And unfortunately, that isn't terribly surprising, at least considering the last administration. Perhaps Mr. Carney won't be as obsessed with, I guess, that woke vision of a future. We'll see as time unfolds. But something else you brought up, which is I'm curious about. I mean, a lot of the revisionism we see is taking historical figures and villainizing them. But there is also a trend of taking, as you said, like, say, Indigenous history and romanticizing a lot of what happened,
Yes.
and trying to, I mean, again, they were human beings. There was bad aspects and good aspects, but there seems to be a sugarcoating put onto a lot of Indigenous history.
Well, I mean, and that's for sure. I mean, I'll just give you one example out in Nova Scotia. Edward Cornwallis was the founder of Halifax, and his statue in Halifax was removed. The park with his name was changed. The streets with his name is Mutt. And he was accused by an Indigenous elder of a genocide against the Mi'kmaq back in the 1700s, and calling for the scalps of their men, women, and children. Well, that really is bending the true historical record. So if you go into the actual history, you'll see the story is rather different. So, I mean, the Indigenous elder who inspired all this wound up getting the Order of Canada, while Cornwallis got canceled. So yes, there's a lot of this romanticizing, and I don't think there's anything wrong with mythology, by the way. I think that's great. I think it's crucial to a country's culture and history. But when you start telling historical falsehoods, that's where I think we should draw the line. And there is a lot of that going on, frankly, in the Indigenous community. It's I'm not saying all of it, of course, but a lot of it is not true facts about our history.
No, or at least have the caveat with Indigenous history. It tends to be an oral history, which has limitations and can have accuracies, but it leaves a lot of room to read in, I guess, and people put it beyond question or reproach when it comes to that somehow, unfortunately. Uh, this has also led to, I mean, other educational opportunities. You talk about our educational institutions, our politicians, our media, but our landmarks, our places. In Calgary, for example, I mean, Fort Calgary, which has been there, I don't know how long. I mean, since the founding of Calgary, but as a historical site, I think since the 60s or 70s. got renamed just quietly the other year to the Confluence, which means nothing. Uh, and
Yes.
he erases what that was. It was a fort in a hostile area in the West in the past, and now it's got this benign, strange Confluence name, and they're working hard to actually erase everything that fort stood for. That's not good.
No, well, I mean, you're telling falsehoods about the history, and it's a knee-jerk kickback reaction by politicians who don't do their homework, and it's happened where I live in Toronto as well, where the main square in Canada's biggest city is now called Sankofa Square, which comes from Ghana, which was a major slave trading nation in West Africa. It was called Young Dundas Square. Henry Dundas was a Scottish parliamentarian and an abolitionist. He's been vilified and canceled. They kicked out an abolitionist and brought in a name that's tied to a slave trading nation. So it's totally ridiculous. And this is the kind of thing that's gone on.
Well, it's interesting you listed Jennifer Dundas, who is a distant, descendant of
Yes.
their Dundas, and she's one of those speaking up at least and pushing back. Um, are there a number of families, I guess, who are a little finally getting upset and pushing back on their ancestors being sort of smeared as they have been?
Well, Jennifer's one of the people I interviewed for my book, and yeah, she's certainly been involved in this. And she, by the way, is a former CBC News anchor in Winnipeg, so she was a journalist who went to Ryerson School to study journalism. Now the school is not called that anymore, and the square is not. It doesn't have the name Dundas. So she said, like, her own personal history has been erased by these revisionists. Jennifer's the only one I know trying to clear a family name in that sense. But I mean, other people you mentioned, like Patrice, who's a highly respected professor and historian. Lynn MacDonald was a member of parliament in Ontario, a leading advocate for many causes, trying to correct the record on Henry Dundas and Ryerson, and also John A. MacDonald. And a number of other people I've talked to. Some of them are historians, academics, journalists. They come from a variety of different backgrounds, as cited in that article in the C2C journal. But like I say, they are the real truth tellers. And it's unfortunate that they have an uphill route to go through to try to set the record straight, because the public is scratching their heads and they buy into these false narratives. And it's been a national dilemma from coast to coast.
So I'm glad these truth tellers and yourself are coming forward and putting it there, but we kind of got to get to the root. Before I let you go, like getting onto the solution based part of it. Should we be trying to get a better, and that always becomes controversial, a curriculum into our public schools, some basis, just so that there's some fact based history grounding our next upcoming generation? I mean, we want to educate the contemporary generation, but my biggest fear is the ones that are coming up with this basically incorrect view of history right now.
Well, I think there's definitely an ideology that persists in our schools, certainly in our post-secondary institutions right across Canada. Some of them are really far extreme. And but it's not, like I say, the history that's taught, and it's not taught very much of any, is often deeply rooted in ideology, not history. So, history isn't something that you're supposed to necessarily like. History is supposed to be facts that took place, and hopefully we can learn from it. That's where I come from. That's where Patrice comes from, Jennifer Dundas, and others like that. So it's not attached to ideology, it's attached to facts. And if we're looking at historical figures, we should be learning historical facts. And like I say, the schools are largely remiss. I think they're out to lunch when it comes to history. And I used to teach community colleges courses, even university students, and young people do not know history, and it's a real shame.
It certainly is, and I mean, it's another area. If people are wondering why you get things like independence movements springing up across the country, or people burning Canadian flags with impunity at other protests and things, well, when you've undone
Indeed.
your sense of identity and history and shared, historical experience, well, then there's not that point of pride to keep people unified. I mean, it has further consequences farther down the line.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you look no further than our first Prime Minister, John A. MacDonald. I really did a deep dive into MacDonald, and the chapter is called "The Trashing of John A. MacDonald," and I learned a lot about MacDonald. I read countless books, including Richard Gwynne, who wrote this incredible 2-volume biography of MacDonald. And he spent 7 years of his life studying him, and he puts him up there with the likes of Abraham Lincoln as leading statesmen from that century. So that's not the story young people are getting about MacDonald today. And I'm one of the people, like truth tellers, if you want to call them that, trying to set the record straight. But it's mob rule. The mob tears down statues, vandalizes statues. They lean on politicians, municipal politicians who also don't know their history, and they impact public policy, and that's a terrible thing, and that's what's been going on right across the country.
Great. Well, I really appreciate the work you've done, speaking to the people and putting it together and coming to talk to us today. Before I let you go, one more time, where can people find that book, Sleepwalking, and keep up with your other writings, columns and such?
Yeah, well, the book is available on Amazon, and it's doing quite well. I'm also getting a lot of interest from Western Canada lately, I find, as well, which is fine, because I know out in BC especially, there's a lot of angst going on these days. And a lot of that also, frankly, I think could be rooted in historical revisionism as well. So you can get it on Amazon. Amazon.ca is the best place to get the book, or you can go to my own website, which is jerryamernick.com.
Great. And do you write on C2C and some other publications now and then?
I write for a lot of publications, though. Corey, that was my first piece for C2C. It was suggested by some colleagues that I should write for them, and we got together and they said, do a story on the real truth teller. So I probably will be doing something else for them shortly.
Great. Well, I like C2C. They give a nice, for long form type of presentations rather than a short,
Very long form, yes.
piece or something.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you again for coming on, and I hope the book continues to sell. And I really appreciate your work and your efforts, sir.
Well, Corey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Great, thanks. So one more time, folks, that is Jerry Amernick, and yes, you can find his book on Amazon and search him out and see his other works. I mean, it is so important; it can't be understated. And this is one of the more subtle ways we're getting in trouble. That's where I kind of turned it back the discussion a little bit in just pointing out that this can lead to real world problems, not just, I guess, decrying or being sad that our people aren't being well enough educated. This comes with consequences. This comes with social division. This comes with battles happening between different cultures and groups that perhaps are based on historical mistruths. And it's irresponsible to keep basing history on ideology. I mean, history, among if you want to look at things, it's a difficult one. It's not as hard as science as math, where your numbers are either this or that. But the bottom line is it should be based on fact, and there's just no getting around that. You find as many sources of that fact as you can. You put them together, whether you like the conclusion or you don't like the conclusion, and you publish it. But right now, it seems to be people, yes, they're looking for what they want to see, and they're molding the message of the historical message to fit their ideology. And it's dangerous, and it's wrong. It's wrong for people, it's a disservice to those historic figures who did put so much in to building this nation. Sir John A. Macdonald was an incredible man. As I was talking about Dutil, Patrice wrote that book. That was just on 1 year, and it really was a fascinating book on what he went through in that period. And this is a man whose career and in making history spanned decades. Yet we're tearing his statues down. We're renaming schools and streets and acting as if this man who built this country, which really is, as much as I complain about a lot of things politically, it's still a bastion of freedom and prosperity like most of the world doesn't get to enjoy. And the reason for that were people like MacDonald back in those days, even if they held views that you don't necessarily agreed with at that time. It doesn't overwrite the good they did. You can't compare that. And it's funny they get selective with it. If it's a left-right thing you want to play with, look at some of the prairie socialists and their embracing of the eugenics policy 50, 60, 70 years ago. It wasn't very nice either, but they did accomplish other things. The famous five in Alberta, they've been digging in and finding quotes from some of them, women's rights advocates who really, again, turned the page for Canadian women in history. But now it turns out that, yes, they held some racial views, which were, well, kind of held by a lot of their contemporaries at the time. And we're seeing that canceled. In Calgary, there was 5 statues that were held or kept downtown, beautiful statues They took them down as they renovated a park and said, oh, well, we'll deal with them later. And they've been sitting in storage ever since. Don't worry, guys. Those statues are never coming back. They're being erased because a couple of them, Nellie McClung or whatnot, I'm not sure even which ones said a couple of untoward things 100 years ago. Not good, guys. Not good at all. But, well, I mean, like anything else, we want to try and battle misinformation with fact. But it's hard. It's hard. Short form, torqued rhetoric tends to stick into people a lot more effectively than long form history and fact. We're in the TikTok generation. If I can't get somebody's attention in a 30-second video, I can't get their attention. That's worrisome. It really is. Hopefully, though, I mean, I think new technology is fantastic. New ways of reaching people and engaging people. Maybe it's starting in the most shallow way with TikTok dance videos and cat videos, but can be converted into something more productive a little later and make it better. I don't know. It's either way, check that out. And let's see what else is going to be happening. McClung. Yes, there's another one. Well, that was mentioned. Yeah. And then McClung got the right for women to vote. And yeah, she's getting canceled. Tommy Douglas. Yes. Greatest Canadian. And he was, as Ammo C9M, a commenter pointed out, was a supporter of forced sterilization and eugenics. Does that mean, Douglas, everything else he did was wrong because he was a eugenics supporter? No. Was the eugenics view wrong? Yes. Hey, look at that. You can actually recognize the good contributions while recognizing the bad. Sir Johnny MacDonald was a notorious drunk, but it doesn't mean he was a fool. But either way, I mean, you know, as you spoke about recent politics leading into this. Justin Trudeau was one of the worst politicians, worst prime ministers in Canadian history by far. No politician has ever managed to undercut Canadian pride and identity more than Justin Trudeau did. I mean, when he started out with his fluffy vacuous, and that was the problem. Canada voted for hair, not for brains. And they kept him in for 10 years, and it showed. So you wouldn't hear Justin talking about history. He'd never read a history book in his life. He read comic books. And he talked about this post-national state. What a beautiful country where we aren't, we aren't Canadian, we're everything else. And what do you think is happening? We have ethnic clashes in the streets. We have protests. And yes, we have independence movements springing up across this country. And yeah, I was an independent supporter prior to Justin Trudeau. And he made my work a heck of a lot easier for me, I tell you. When we've got this country where everybody's expected to look at their feet and be ashamed of themselves and not show pride in anything, it's not so hard to pull them away and say, well, why don't we vote to form another one, is it? And these self-loathing revisionists, I met one that it's just stuck in my head. It was the most bizarre thing. So I was at Medicine Hat College a couple of weeks ago. I was a speaker there with the Rebel Independence Tour, a beautiful theater they had. They got all sorts of pressure to cancel us. They wouldn't do it, but they did allow for protesters to be there as well. They just kept everybody peaceful and separate. I can't say enough good things about the college doing exactly what a learning institution should do, which is host both sides of a debate and just allow them to express themselves without stopping each other. And there was an older woman who showed up early and was chatting with us while we were setting up. And she just looked like anybody's stereotypical picture of a grandma. You know, she was short and elderly and very polite and friendly and smiling and everything. And then, but as she's going, yes, so I've been in Canada my whole life and I'm a colonialist and I know that. And she just with this smile and this weird beatific look on her when declaring herself as a colonialist. And whatever she was, 80 years old, it was just bizarre. It was like having a nice little old granny, but then suddenly, here, have some arsenic-laden tea. Like you are in a nice, benign-looking package, yet you're spouting poison. So you've spent whatever she had, 80 years in this country, born here, contributing, doing whatever she did, and still calls herself a colonialist? Piss off. This settler colonialist crap, this double standard, and there's left problems, there's right problems, but I tell you, the bulk of this self-loathing crap comes from the left, where the only ones who apparently have any authority are purebred Indigenous Canadians. Really? That is so grossly racially intolerant, and they don't see it. They, as a commenter there says, Corey, they're psychopaths. Yes, they are. That's what I mean. That's what creeped me out. Here's friendly little grandma, and then that little spouting realized this woman's crazy and dangerously so. No, she's not going to pull a knife and stab me or shoot me, but she is dangerously crazy. And she's a symptom of a whole lot more of them. So think of that, though, that myopic attitude that everybody who wasn't, not just anybody born here anymore, but going farther back, is an intruder, a settler, a colonialist. Think of yet at the same time, they blame other people for being xenophobic and intolerant and everything else if they question the amount of immigration coming in currently. Well, you're just saying the same you're condemning one and practicing the same thing on another spot. And I know somebody mentioned, yes, if First Nations came across the Bering Sea and at one point came from somewhere else too. Like it just never stops, and it's counterproductive. But this idiocy, and I refuse to do that we and them. We owe them. We did bad things. We did put them on reserves. We created the residential schools. I didn't do a damn thing, and I'm not sorry for any of it. So don't try to make me feel guilty for it. I won't. I can't. I didn't do it. There's a little quote I saw on the internet one time that was brilliant. It was a couple people debating, and I can't remember the exact context, but it was a white person and a black person, and it was the American context. But somebody saying along the lines of, I never owned a slave, and you never picked cotton. So let's start the conversation from there. Because there are people in the loony left down the state saying there should be reparations paid for slavery. Look, slavery ended, 170 years ago now? Who are you going to pay reparations for? Sure, it caused damage. Sure, it still is the root of some of the racial divide that's happening to this day and the way things are populated in the United States. But you can't demand reparation from somebody's descendant for what somebody else's descendant may or may not have been assaulted by. But people are actually demanding that. And they're saying you should be ashamed of yourself. There's a weird, gross, extreme leftist demonstration I saw at one point where there was a black guy standing and this white woke nut bar on his knee, licking the boot of the black guy, just saying, I have to feel it so I can, be able to understand what happened 150 years ago. You guys are insane. This isn't helping anybody. This isn't unifying anybody. This isn't making us all better off or stronger. This is dividing the cultures. This is making it worse. This is taking the scab off of a wound that's healing slowly enough as it is, and just constantly reopening it. And who's getting better? Has racism ended? No. We're seeing more division, more fights, more extremism because we're refusing to get together. Another one saying from the communist playbook, Mystery Chief saying struggle sessions. Yeah, it's absurdity, but it's brainwashing and it's problematic. Here's another beauty example. Let's just talk about things gone out of control, where I'll be called intolerant for pointing it out, but I don't care. So you might have seen that news story. Toronto police officer Farhan Ali, he praised October 7th, where they're raping and murdering women and children in Israel. People keep overlooking that. The left is just celebrating that orgy of murder and rape that happened October 7th. I really wish every one of them, somehow could have been dragged over there where I was to see the bloodstains, to see the blown up houses, and watch that god-awful, unfiltered video of what those monsters did. Either way, this guy praised it. That's how extreme this guy is. And you know what he got in reward for praising that? He was the Toronto policeman person charged with, communicating with the Islamic community out there. Yeah, you wonder why they took no issue with hate protests targeting Jewish neighborhoods, households, people's homes with extremists? Well, because this is the guy with the police with it. And guess what? As with so many adherents of Islam, and there's a lot of them, he's a rapist. He's been arrested and charged, actually, 3 counts of it. Yeah, real winner, isn't he? And guess what? Grooming gangs, rape gangs, prostitution gangs. I'll say what we're not allowed to say. Oh, look at the headlines, read the names, they're all Islamic. I'm not saying every Islamic person's participating in those. No, I am not. But there's a real problem with that ideology. And we got to be allowed to say it if we're going to solve it. So yeah, I'll say that quiet part out loud. because this is the sort of thing you end up with. You take a man who celebrated murder and rape, and lo and behold, it turns out he's a rapist. Who would have seen that coming? How blinded by wokeness does the Toronto Police Force have to be to have taken a man like him and put him into a position of authority for that many years? And gee, he went and did what you would have thought he'd do. A person who celebrates rape committed rape. Didn't see that coming. Maybe we should get a few more of the people who've been celebrating violence and terrorism out of positions of authority. Wouldn't that be a crazy thing to try? Just maybe we should give it a crack. All right, that's enough pissing and moaning out of me, guys. Thank you very much for joining in today. Be sure to tune into the Pipeline tonight. Marty's show's on tomorrow. Nigel was doing an interview. Subscribe to those Western Standard channels. There's all sorts of content coming up there all the time. John is doing a fantastic job in production so that we get all that content as it's coming and get it out to you. And of course, subscribe to the Western Standard itself. Thank you very much. We will see you next week at this time.